Tanya and Smiles for us for hosting the event. And please just help yourself to food and drink. There's plenty there, so feel free to get up and have some more during the talk. Right, who am I? Sort of like to know that. Who's this guy talking to? Well, basically, I'm a track work rider. So what I do every day between 4 and 9, I ride racehorses for a living. Then besides that, I work as an exercise consultant. I have my own little gym in Glenelg. And what that means is I basically provide one-on-one training for the people there. I also like to speak about diet and exercise, like tonight. And I like to think I'm fairly good at it. But we'll find out in about 90 minutes or so. Okay, let's get started. Diet and exercise. But what I really want to talk about is what I call bending the aging curve. So, what does that mean? So this is what you call an aging curve. What do you think that would be off? Any ideas? Okay, so that's an aging curve of body fat percentage. So as you can see, let's see if that curve could speak, what would it be saying? Is the age down the bottom and then percentage of body fat up the vertical axis. So if that curve could speak, it'd be saying it's normal to gain more body fat as we age. So because this is normal, if this is like if you go across the population, that's what happens. Should we not worry about it because it happens to everybody? Or should we be concerned even though it's normal? You had to pick one or two. Which one would you pick? Two? Correct answer. Okay, I think we should be concerned. So to improve, we want to bend that curve up or down? Down, exactly. Now what would the curve be saying? If it could speak. Yes, it's possible to remain lean as we age, right? Okay, but is this possible? Is that what happens across the board? Is it possible? Let's find out. So, welcome to my life as a human guinea pig. So what this picture is a body composition test in a machine called the BODPOT, which I had at age 40, about 5-6 years ago. And what it does, it tells you your weight, it tells you what you call your FFM, which is your fat-free mass, your organs, bone, muscle, and connective tissue, basically anything that isn't body fat. And then it tells you your fat mass, so how much fat you got on your body. So that was my statistics at the age of 40, and it worked out that my body fat percentage was 16.7. So here we have again our aging curve of body fat percentage, and if we do an updated version, this is what it looks like. So think of it that obviously there's a high end and a low end of the population, but think of it that's the whole population within those two green lines, okay? And as you can see, like the other one, it's advancing upwards as we age. So where I landed at age 40 was right at the low end. 2 years later, I had a DEXA scan, which is another way to assess your body composition, and I was pretty much the same. Okay. 6 months later, I just started to be able to push that curve down a little bit. Okay, so my body fat percentage was dropping. A year after that, I pushed it down even further. So I was now sitting at about 12% body fat. 6 months after that, come up slightly, not a lot. 7 months later, it sort of stayed at that level. 2 months later, down a bit again. I'm going the wrong way. So I basically had a lot of these. I lost myself train of thought there. January this year, I was still at 12%. And then 4 months later, which was last week, I was still sitting at that. Okay. If we look at then the actual kilo of fat mass on my body, we started at 11 kilos. We brought that down to about 7.5. Okay, so about 3.5 for me over 5 years. So if we look at bending this aging curve, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Okay. So between the age of 40 and 45, I managed to get that down even though I was aging. The question is how? So here's a first little quiz of the night for you. What are the 2 tools we can use?
Don't exercise.
Correct answer. Okay. So let's start with exercise. And let's have a look at my fitness level when I was 40 and I was at 16.7% body fat. So you see this lovely lady here that did the body composition test with me. Her name is Heather, and she's a very smart lady because she's a PhD. And that's her husband at the back there. He's actually a medical doctor and a PhD. Because where I was at the University of Florida in the States. And what I was actually there for was a VO2 max test. You might have heard about this test. What it is, it's basically a measure of fitness. It basically measures the amount of oxygen you can take up and then distribute through your body. Okay. Now, how it's conducted is that they stick you on a treadmill and you start at very low effort. So you might be at a walk, and then you finish at your max effort. So every minute, you imagine this treadmill will go faster, and they'll put the incline up. And they keep doing that basically till you say stop. So what Kevin is doing there at the back, looking at the screen, is monitoring my heart. Because it's also what you call a stress test. So you're at max effort, so they keep a very close eye on how you are throughout the test. And this is a chart over where you land. They give you a number of how much oxygen you can see there on the vertical axis from 10 to 70. And they divide you into age groups as well. So at age 40, wherever I landed there, that would tell me my fitness level. So this is where I landed, right up there. So I was really quite happy with that, being 40. And to give you an idea of what I could do, I could run a half marathon in about 1 hour and 26 minutes. But what I also did was I was maintaining a training schedule of about 150 kilometres a week. So I was pretty much running half a marathon every day. Not at the speed though, but I was running the distance. So my guess is, looking back now, that I was probably as fit as I would ever be if I look at those measures. So I would say at age 40, I was at my peak fitness. So the question is, what happened in the 5 years since until today that got me leaner? If you had to take a guess, would you say that I exercised more or exercised less? Now that we're talking about exercise. Any guesses? A or B? B? Correct answer. I even stopped running very shortly after that test. So I exercised less, but I got leaner. It's not exactly the picture we sort of have of how we lose body fat, is it? this is sort of the picture we have, that the more we move, the more we burn. But nevertheless, this is what I did. So to try and answer that question and show you how that works, let's have a look at how we actually burn body fat in real time during exercise. Because the cool thing about this test, you see the mask here I got on? They can measure all sorts of things. They can measure whether you burn sugar or whether you burn fat every second you're on there. So what happens is that you get, as soon as you put it on, the information starts feeding into the computer, and it tells the computer what energy you're running on. Okay, so the test started, and I was standing still. I was at 0 effort. And the computer said I was burning 100% fat and no sugar. So I hadn't started moving yet. Okay, so that was interesting. So now I got into a slight jog, and you can see how the fat there started to come down slightly. But I was still burning relatively mostly fat and very little sugar. So then they increase the speed, and you can see how it's changing again. Fat's coming down, sugar's going up. And we're probably now at that 75% fat still and 25% sugar. So 60% effort, about 7 minutes into the test. You can see that now fat and sugar is about that 50-50. Okay, so a mixture of fat and sugar burning at that good running pace. So then another 2 minutes goes by, and I'm now at about 80% effort. So at a pretty good clip. But now you can see I'm burning more sugar than I am burning fat, and more or less swap places. So it's probably about that 70% fat and 30% sugar. 70% sugar and 30% fat. And then at the finish, when I'm going as hard as I can, I'm burning 100% sugar and absolutely no fat. Okay? So if we sum that up, what it tells us about what we burn when we exercise is that when you're at 0% effort, like when you're standing still about to go for a run, you're burning no sugar. But when you're going flat out in a sprint, you're burning 100% sugar. On the other hand, when you're standing still, you're burning 100% fat, and when you're going flat out, you're burning 0% fat. So this idea that we have that the most effort burns the most fat doesn't sort of match up with the science. You don't get a much more accurate test than that. So the most effort actually burns the most sugar and the least fat. But where we do burn the most fat is when we sleep, at the very least effort. Can anybody live with that?
Yeah.
You do that? No problem? Okay, so what I basically did to get leaner, I stopped running and I started sleeping more. Is that doable, do you think? Okay. And obviously I started burning more fat. So that's the easy part. It's not quite that simple. Because there's always two sides of the same coin. There's an easy part and there's a hard part. The easy part is burning. You do that in our sleep. What's the hard part of burning body fat, do you think? Any ideas? Well, let's see if we can work it out. Let's just have a quick look at what body fat is. So if you go to our old friend Wikipedia, you can see it's referred to as adipose tissue, and you can read through all that, and you get to the point where it says its main function is to be a reserve of lipids which can be oxidized to meet the energy demands of the body. So think of it this way. your body fat is like stored away. So it's a reserve that can meet the energy demand if we need it. It can be oxidized, meaning it can be burnt, or we can think of it as energy being stored away. Okay, it's a reserve of energy. We looked at the easy part. It's easy enough to burn. That's no problem. But what do you think the hard part is? If it's so easy to burn, why do we accumulate it? The hard part is obtaining access. Now, we looked at exercise. You can exercise hard or you can exercise long, and you'll just burn more sugar and you'll still won't have access to your body fat. So how do we actually unlock that? Find that lock or the key that unlocks it so we can burn it when we sleep. That's what we're going to look at now, how to access body fat so we can burn it. This is where we then switch over to talking about diet. Okay? But first we're going to talk about something called insulin. Does anybody know what insulin is? Anybody heard of insulin? Sugar? Yes, got something to do with sugar. Okay, what it is again, if we go to Wikipedia, it's a hormone, and what it says there, the gist of it is, it regulates the metabolism of carbohydrates, fat and protein by promoting the absorption of carbohydrates, especially glucose from the blood into the liver, fat and skeletal muscle cells. Okay, that's a bit of a mouthful. Let's just take the important part. It promotes the absorption of carbohydrates, especially glucose, from the blood into the liver, fat and muscle cells. It might be easy to understand if we look at the visual chart. So here we're eating a meal, which produces blood glucose that goes into the bloodstream. What else do we refer to as blood glucose? What do we just call that in simple terms? Blood what? Blood sugar. Yeah, okay. So the way it works is that you start eating, and then that blood sugar to go into your muscle and organ cells for energy, that's what insulin basically helps to do. Okay, so like it facilitates so that you can absorb. Whenever you start eating, your pancreas releases insulin, and then you can absorb the blood sugar. Okay, and the same thing happens. It helps if there's anything left over. It'll convert that blood sugar to fat and store it in your fat cells. Simple enough. And what you refer to this state, if it works nicely like that, we call that your cells are insulin sensitive. And if you're insulin sensitive, then it means that you only need a small amount of insulin to get the job done. Okay, so you eat a little bit of sugar, a little bit of insulin released, goes into your cells, fine. And if it's working really well, you'll have more going into energy and less into storage. And if that's the case, if you have more into your muscle and organ cells than is going into your fat cells, what sort of body composition do you think you'll have? Perfect. Perfect answer. Exactly, you'll be leaner. But remember, what we're trying to do is, we still haven't answered the question, how do we actually access the stored body fat we have so we can burn it? Okay, let's take this scenario. So now you're eating, blood sugar's going into your bloodstream, then you go to sleep. What's going to happen to your blood sugar after you've been asleep for a while? It's going to start going down. And then you'll have, most of that will still be going into your muscle cells and even less into your fat cells. And you keep sleeping, it's going to drop even further. You'll probably have none going into your fat cells, and now all of it going into your muscle and organ cells. A little while longer, energy is running low, your sugar stores are just about used up. What's going to happen now? In an ideal scenario?
You get access to the fat stores.
Exactly. You're going to start converting your fat storage, like we talked about before. Think of it as energy stored away. That's going to be start released back into the bloodstream, and then you can use that for energy. But I still haven't answered how we actually did that, except like we went to sleep. Okay. How do we actually gain access and release that fat into your bloodstream? Well, it has to do with insulin. So, if we look again at Wikipedia, low insulin levels have the effect by promoting catabolism, the breakdown, especially of reserved body fat. So what that means is that low insulin levels releases body fat for energy use. So here's a chart over that. If you have that low insulin blood level, you only have a small amounts released in your bloodstream, it allows that fat to come out. Okay. Okay, so here's a short quiz to see whether you've been listening or I've been clear or both. So if you have low insulin blood level, how much insulin is released? Not much, small amount, correct. And what do we call that? If you have low insulin levels that allows the release of fat, what do we call that state? Look, what's related to insulin? We started off with it. What you call your cells, and we call what? Correct. Okay, I haven't done too bad a job if at least one person can remember. Okay, so we'll just go through how it sort of all works. So if you're insulin sensitive, you have a small amount of insulin released from your pancreas, which means you have low insulin blood levels. And that's going to do what to your body composition? It's going to limit your fat gain. And what else is it going to do? Somebody said?
Allow you to mobilize your fat stores.
Yes, so you'll allow fat release, and your body composition will probably be
lean.
Yes. Okay. So how to access body fat so we can burn it, remain insulin or become insulin sensitive and have a low insulin blood level. Easy enough? Easy done. How do we do that though? That's one way. That's and go to sleep. That is actually correct. But let's go a little bit back to insulin. It says it promotes the absorption of carbohydrates. Okay, so with that knowledge, what would help to ensure a low insulin blood level? Carbohydrates is what stimulates insulin to go up. Okay, a low carbohydrate diet helps to ensure low insulin blood level. Make sense? Okay, what are carbohydrates though? Yes, that's some of the food, but it really is just another word for sugar. Okay. So once you eat the rice, it basically becomes sugar once it gets digested. So let's look at some high carbohydrate food. I'm sure we've all had plenty of these in our time. So just how much actual sugar is in those things is quite unbelievable. We don't really think about it. So might want to think next time when you have a handful of M&Ms. But let's look at what we drink. You can see there that orange juice has about the same amount of sugar, about 5 teaspoons, as a Red Bull. And that's because there's probably about juice of 5 oranges in that. And when we look at how much sugar is in an orange, there's about 2 teaspoons in one orange. So no wonder there's a lot of sugar in orange juice. Well, it's all the same once it comes in the body, really. Yeah. And you mentioned rice before. It's carbohydrates in there. Once it's broken down, it all becomes sugar inside the body. So you can actually see here there's less carbohydrates in beer than there is in orange juice. So people that drink beer, you say, wow, it's the winner. Sorry, water is. Okay, but these foods, which are usually our staples, you got your bread, potato, pasta and rice in there, and your breakfast cereal. You can see how much sugar is actually in those. Well, that's also the reason we eat them, to get energy. So that is why. But if we take something like bread, and we look at, it has 46 grams of sugar per 100 grams. That's 9 teaspoons of sugar per 100 grams of bread. And then if we go the other end of the scale, below ground vegetables is where you sort of find sugar as well. And because they're in the ground, that's why they have more sugar. But again, it's also why we eat them, to get energy. Okay? It's just that it's carbohydrates. Okay, so let's have a look at some low carbohydrate food. And there's the contrast. Above ground vegetables really don't have many carbohydrates in them. You can see the difference there. Especially if you look at something like spinach or avocado, as we have over here tonight, there's hardly anything in there. And there are even some low carbohydrate fruits. Your berries are your lowest. You eat 100 grams of those and you'll pretty much only get a teaspoon of sugar. So if you can sort of compare high and low carbohydrate foods, you can see that you can really load up on the low carbohydrate food in volume and quantity compared to when you eat high carbohydrate food. Okay, so low carbohydrate food is the way to go. So to remain or become insulin sensitive, we've already answered that question. Low or high carbohydrate diet, well, a lower carbohydrate diet is going to go a long way to help that. So again, what I did in those 5 years, almost 6 now, I became insulin sensitive, and I've been on a low carbohydrate diet the whole time. So what we're saying really is that the key to unlocking your fat storage is remain insulin sensitive, and a low carbohydrate diet is going to go a long way towards helping that. Does that make sense? Is there any questions so far or not? We're going to answer a lot of them as we go along. Is all that pretty clear? Okay. Then of course the burning of it is no problem once we can release it. So to sum up, what I did was I slept more and I ate a low carbohydrate diet, and that's it. And I became leaner than I was when I was running 150 kilometers a week. So is it possible to bend this aging curve? Yes, it's possible. But let's go back to that. Basically, if you're insulin sensitive, you're leaner. But what was I beforehand if I wasn't insulin sensitive and fatter? Does anybody know the opposite of what insulin sensitivity is?
Insulin resistant.
Insulin resistant, yep. So what's that? Well, when you're insulin resistant, you tend to be fat. So let's look into what that is. Okay, so we have another quiz. Short one. If insulin sensitive is small amounts of insulin released, what do you think happens when you're insulin resistant? Large amounts. Perfect. And if insulin sensitive is a low insulin blood level, what do you think you have when you're resistant? Perfect. God, you have been very smart. Right, so let's go back to our scenario here of insulin sensitive. Only a small amount of insulin is needed to get the job done, to get that sugar into your cells. When you're insulin resistant, you have a large amount released and you have a high amount of insulin in your blood level. So what's actually happening is that the cells are starting to resist the effect of insulin and taking in less blood sugar. That's why it's called insulin resistance. But why would they do that? Why would they all of a sudden start to resist the effect of insulin? Let's take a step back. Why would the pancreas release a large amount of insulin? I've sort of tried to give you the answer a little bit in my illustrations there. Why would the pancreas be releasing more insulin?
It responds to what you eat.
So, due to a high blood sugar level, right? We just talked about how if you eat a lot of carbohydrates, that's going to increase. Okay, so this should be an easy one. What can cause a higher blood sugar level?
Eating lots of sugar.
A diet high in carbohydrates. Okay. Well, basically, a diet high in sugar. It's all the same once we eat it. But why would the cells want to take in less sugar? Wouldn't it just take it in and burn it? What the cell's actually saying is that we have too much sugar, we can't handle it anymore, so they're going to shut the door. So we could actually call it sugar resistant or carbohydrate resistant. So now, I'm going to throw you a little curveball. Can you see how we got the muscle cell there that's insulin resistant? What do you think is happening to your fat cells at the same time? Any idea?
Taking up the sugar.
They're remaining insulin sensitive and taking in more sugar. So what is actually going on is that the muscle cells and organ cells are saying we can't handle any more sugar, we have too much. And they become insulin resistant, trying to tell the body that. Whereas your fat cells say, bring it on, we'll just take it all. Because they remain insulin sensitive. Now, if you got this scenario, what do you think your body composition is going to tend to be? Exactly, we're going to tend to be fatter. So remember that when we're sensitive and we have that low insulin blood level, it allows the release of fat. What do you think when you're resistant and you have a high insulin blood level, will it allow the release of fat? Just take a wild guess. No, it stops the fat release. Okay. So we'll sum up here. Insulin resistant, you have a large amount of insulin released from your pancreas. You have a high blood level of insulin. And yet another little quiz. What's your body what's going to happen in your cells? We're going to increase fat gain because it's all going into your fat cells and hardly anything for energy. And we're going to what? Stop the fat release as well. So we're getting hit at both sides. Okay, we're storing it and we can't release it. That's how we get fat, basically. And we're, of course, going to tend to be fatter. All right? So with insulin resistant, the main culprit is what? Yeah, all this good stuff. Right. So basically I can never prove it, but I'm pretty sure I was insulin resistant when I was running. So then you ask, well, were you eating a high carbohydrate diet? No, I was actually on a low carbohydrate diet 6 months prior to the test I had, which is probably tells you why I could burn a lot of fat. So how was I insulin resistant? Is there another way to become insulin resistant? Well, let's have a look at this study I found on PubMed. You can tell I haven't got much of a life because this is what I spend my time studying. And because I was into running, I found this study called the Post-Marathon Paradox. I might have read it in a book and then I found the study. I'm probably not that smart. So what post-marathon means, it's after finishing a marathon. Now, it caught my interest because the headline there was insulin resistance in the face of glycogen depletion. Okay, so what does that mean? So basically your glycogen is your stored form of sugar in liver and muscle cells. And when you deplete that, it obviously means you go from being full to being relatively empty. So when you're at the start of the marathon, your stores are full, and then when at the finish, they're probably pretty close to empty. So we had these two scenarios which didn't seem to add up. You're insulin resistant after running a marathon, even though your sugar stores are down. So what does that mean? Your sugar stores are down, but now your cells don't want to take in the sugar. So they haven't even got enough, but they're still rejecting it. So let's have a closer look at that. This is basically what we're saying. You might be on a low carbohydrate diet and producing obviously some blood sugar like I was, but you're sensitive and your stores are full at the start of the marathon. You're still on a low carbohydrate diet in the marathon, even though you haven't eaten. But if you're insulin sensitive, now those stores would start to fill up, right? But they don't. So they're empty. You're on a low carbohydrate diet and you're insulin resistant. So how does that work? Is that these two things, this is why they called it a paradox, because they're seemingly a contradictory statement. As I said, we just learned that with insulin resistant, the cell's saying they have too much sugar, we can't handle it anymore. But now you've run a marathon where you haven't even got enough and you become insulin resistant. It doesn't make sense. So anyway, if you go and read that study, what they think is happening is that due to the stress on your body's cells from running a marathon, you've taken yourself from being sensitive at the start to being resistant at the finish. So basically, it's the danger of over-exercising. What I was probably doing by running half a marathon a day. So again, this brings it back to exercise. You just can't exercise your way out of, I think the old saying goes, out of a bad diet. And you can even do real damage. So here again we have that scenario. After a marathon, you're depleted and your body won't take in the glucose. Your body starts to release more insulin, which probably just pushes it into your fat cells. And you become fatter, even though you've just run a marathon. So at the time, I was looking fairly lean, and as we saw on that scale, I was right at the bottom end, but I was still within what do you call the normal population, even though I was at the lean end. But what you can't see, this is not my scan though, is what's going on the inside. Does anybody know what we refer to this as? This is basically what's going on. So subcutaneous fat is the fat just below your skin, and then your visceral fat is in behind your stomach muscles around your organs. So I probably didn't have much subcutaneous fat, as you can see. But what we couldn't see, is all the fat inside. And when you're in this state, it's often referred to as a toffee. Anybody know what that stands for? Thin outside, fat inside. Okay, so you see all the slim people, they might not be that slim after all. Okay. Now at that time, 9 months earlier, before I had the VO2 max test in Florida at age 39.5, I just run an ultra marathon in Mexico, 85 kilometers. Now, an ultra marathon is any foot race longer than a traditional marathon length of 42.195 kilometers. And in the last 4 years, I'd complete about one every year, plus my training. So when I learned about this, that you can actually go from insulin sensitive to resistant by running a marathon, do you think a few alarm bells went off in my head? So that's the real reason why I stopped running. Okay, I start to see how things really work. I always thought I was slim because I ran so much. Fact is, I'm probably slim because of my parents that stand up there. But I was still relatively fatter than I probably should be, if that makes sense. Yeah? So I basically went from being fatter to leaner by going from resistant to sensitive. At least that's my belief. Okay? I can't obviously go back and collect all the data. So what we started talking about is that can we bend this body fat aging curve? Yes, it is possible, I believe. If you have a low carbohydrate diet and you sleep enough. So that sort of begs the question though, so why exercise? You know, if remaining lean is all about what you eat and sleeping, that's easy done. Well, let's talk about bending an aging curve with exercise. Which then makes you ask which aging curve requires exercise to bend it. So see if you can guess what this one is. I'm not giving you too much. Any idea what that might be? So we saw the other one that went up with age. This one drops with age across the population. That's good enough for me. Your fat-free mass. Okay, it's a natural thing for it to drop off as we age. See, the women have a little bit of an advantage. You might have a lower mass on average, but it's a lot more of a straight line for a lot longer, whereas we just start declining basically from 20. So you might remember my body composition test, fat-free mass, organs, bone, muscle, and connective tissue, so it's everything that we lose. So to improve this, would we want to push that up or down? Correct. But some people might say, look, why bother? Why bother? Remember, this is normal. You know, we sort of accept it as part of aging. But the question is, what is normal? There's actually a term for this, losing your lean tissue. Anybody know the term? Anybody heard of this? Sarcopenia? Anybody know what that means?
Losing muscle mass.
Yes. So if you look that up, just in your dictionary or Wikipedia, the loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength as a result of aging. So it happens regardless, okay? Every day. From the day you're born, well, maybe not from the day you're born, from roughly about 20 or 30, we start going that way. So, let's look at a 21-year-old normal male. We put him on the scale there. So he's got the maximum amount of muscle mass at 21, normal. Okay, so now we take a 63-year-old. You can see the change there already. That would put them about there, right? Let's take a 74-year-old, normal. That'd be about there. We probably should say these are also sedentary. Okay, so these are people who haven't done much exercise. So really what this curve represents is the sedentary part. If you don't do much, this is what's going to happen. And that curve there, it's the same one for women. But as I said, you can pretty much hold on to it till about your 60, and then it'll start declining after that, if you're sedentary. So, how does normal look to you? Just out of curiosity. Pretty, not very nice, does it? So, what we want to try and do is push this upwards. But again, is this possible? Let's find out. Welcome back to my life as a human guinea pig. So I had my fat-free mass measured at 40. And we just put that on a scale. That was almost 55 kilos. Then the next scan I had, after I stopped running, remember, I'd almost put on close to 2 kilos of lean mass. That tells you something too about over-exercising. Then it actually dropped off again, and then it stayed down here, pretty level, went down even. So about 44 years of age, it was actually fairly low again. Then I got a bump back up in about 6 months' time, and then stayed fairly level. And this is where I am today. So if we look at the aging curve, fat-free mass, that we put that curve down to suit me, because about 55 kilos is what I had when I was 40 years of age, that graph there. And then over the next 5 years, I was pretty much in the same spot, up a little bit. Which meant I was going more in a straight line instead of declining. So you could say it going like that. So it does seem possible to bend this curve with age. At least according to this human guinea pig. But look, instead of this, I'd like to think this would be possible. And I've sort of been able to do it for 5 years, but can that continue? That age is against us, really, when it comes to this. Let's find out. Okay, so here you have a 40-year-old triathlete. And let's put him on the scale with our 21-year-old sedentary male. So that'll be like that, because you actually can see your 40-year-old has more muscle mass than your 21-year-old. So that's why I put him in a straight line, and it's even going up slightly. Then we take a 70-year-old male triathlete. Now it even looks to me like he's almost got more. He's a little bit leaner than the 40-year-old. So we'll keep that curve going up, put him at 70, and that's where he would be. So it does look like this is possible. And it's about the same for women. Okay, you can get away with not exercising a bit longer, but then you have to eventually, alright? But if our 20-year-old is sedentary and normal, what does that make our 40-year-old and 70-year-old who are triathletes? Who said something? Well, if the 21-year-old normal, what would we? If that's what we accept as normal, then what would we say about the others? What would they be? Well, they'd be abnormal, right? Which would you rather be, normal or abnormal? Abnormal. Everybody wants to be abnormal. So it's not always a bad thing not to be normal. Okay. So bending fat-free mass curve is possible with exercise. But we come back to this question, some people might say, okay, that's how it looks on the inside, but why bother? You know, this is not enough for me to bother with it. Well, think of it this way. What about if you can remain independent versus becoming dependent? And to illustrate that, let's say this is independent and this is dependent. Which one of these do you think is going to need one of these walking frames very soon? Top one. That's the fact of it, yeah? And we hear so much about older people losing their balance, falling and breaking a hip. And that's really due to those muscle fibers not being able to contract and keep you balanced. Okay, they simply deteriorate to such a level that they can't do their job. So none of us want to end up here. So what type of exercise prevents FFM loss? Well, we can see that their triathlon, if you're a triathlete, that seems to prevent it, even though you're abnormal. So a triathlete competes in triathlons where you typically swim, cycle and do long distance running. Of course, I've already scared you of long distance running, so I don't think anybody here is interested in doing triathlons. I don't know if anybody feel like taking that up tomorrow. But if in doubt, you can just ask Google what to do. So I obviously knew what to type in to find this. But if you put in resistant exercise reverses aging in human skeletal muscle, you'll see that usually this comes up as the first hit. And then you can actually read the whole study that was published in a medical journal. But I'm not going to do that to you tonight. So we're just going to have a quick look at the abstract. And it says there, the first line, human aging associated with skeletal muscle atrophy and functional impairment, sarcopenia. Well, what do you know? So atrophy simply means you're wasting away, deteriorating. What they did was, before exercise training, older adults were 59% weaker than younger, but after 6 months of training in older adults, strength improved significantly such that they were only 38% lower than young adults. So see how we talked about bending that aging curve? They now close the gap. So it does look like that resistance training can be very effective. If you see when this is published, it's nothing new. This is about 12 years ago. Okay, so it's not new science. Okay, but is it safe? That's the first thing people usually think. Well, that depends. What do you mean by safe? What do you think about that? Is that safe? In my opinion, that's just stupid. So what about this one? Does it look safe? Or does it just look stupid? And painful. And dangerous and all that. So what is the safest resistance training? Exercise machines. Because nothing can fall on you, okay? So if we compare, you want to do what you call a shoulder press, press something over your head. You can see which one is safer, can't you? Which one you cannot get hurt, and the other one you pretty much can't avoid getting hurt. Let's say you then want to train your legs, and you can do what you call a leg press machine on the left, or you can get into what you call a squat. You can load a bar up with lots of weight, which could be okay, but you could end up like that. Okay. So is it safe? Well, let's even have a quick look at a little bit of science. So if we go back to PubMed, where I spend a bit of my time, they did a study here with heavy resistance training is safe. Okay, so how did they do it? Okay, in post-menopausal women with loads of very low bone mass. Okay, well if you can do it in that, then it must be pretty safe. What they did, they used what they called high-intensity progressive weight training. And what they found was that there'd be no injuries, and they concluded that it's safe and effective exercise. Remember, this was in post-menopausal women. So yes, it is safe if done correctly. Okay, so how much resistance training is needed? Well, let's go back here. What they found in the study was that they used this resistance training, and they concluded that brief supervised resistance training was enough. So then we're sort of back to, well, what do we mean by brief? Well, according to this guy, 30 minutes once a week is enough. Sound a bit too good to be true? Yep. Okay. But let's have a look anyway. All right. So if you go to my website, I've sort of outlined the whole philosophy behind it, and I define exercise, and then I go into a whole explanation of why it's brief and why it works. But it basically works like this. We're built for survival. Okay, and a survival situation requires 100% physical effort. If you put in that 100% going as hard as you can, you're going to activate what I call the survival response. But it has a technical name. Does anybody know what it is? Correct. Very good. And again, we go to Wikipedia, we can see that the fight or flight response is a biological response. Basically, we respond to an acute high stress. So now let's say this guy happened to get away from the lion. How would his body react in the days and weeks to come? What do you think it would do? Any ideas? It would sleep, yeah. Basically, it would make adaptations. It would try and be ready for the next lion to come along, but maybe be a little bit better at it. So we say his body would adapt. It's the process of change by which an organism species becomes better suited to the environment. So the question is, what sort of changes would be made in his body? You got away from the lion, but you had this acute activation of your fight or flight response. Okay, let me see if I can tease it out of you. If we had these two guys, who would you put your money on to get away? Bottom or the top? Okay. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you pick him? Pretty simple. He's probably the fastest, and Holman's going to be the slowest. But what is the difference between these two? What do you think Homer's body fat mass is? High or low? Correct. What do you think this guy's body fat mass is? Low. Okay, now let's take Homer's muscle mass Low? Probably not 0. And what about this guy? High. So basically, you have these two different compositions, means that in that same situation, one's going to be slow and one's going to be fast. And one's going to be non-survival and the other one's going to be survival. So basically my argument is that you activate your fight or flight response. That'll send a message as to what tissue are needed for survival, because that's what we're built for. And those messages are going to be that you need a low fat mass but a high muscle mass. Fat mass is going to slow you down. Fat mass is going to speed you up. But remember, fight or flight is basically an acute stress. So acute physical stress sends a message to the body. So what you basically need to do is go and find a lion to chase you so you can make this happen. But since there aren't many free roaming lions in Adelaide, we'll just use resistance training. Now I'm just going to give you a 90-second demonstration of what that can look like. I'll talk you through it. So this is what I'd call heavy, high-intensity progressive resistance training. So if you notice there, you're moving the weight very slowly. You have to select a weight that is heavy enough so you can't move it too quick. But there's no resting at the bottom. So just before the weight touches, you take off again. And then at the top, you don't quite log out your arms, but you reverse immediately. So basically, you've got complete tension on the muscles all the time. So there's no rest. There's no bouncing the weight at the bottom and top. So I know it's a bit like watching paint dry, and it doesn't look very hard. But trust me, you fatigue very, very quickly. We're probably about getting close to 60 seconds in. So my arms are starting to shake a little bit. So the fatigue basically just builds and builds and builds because you're getting no rest. You're never resting, okay? You're not trying to get reps, you're just trying to, what you call, stay under the load of the weight as long as you can. So now I know that I probably won't, if I go to the bottom, I won't get back up, so I'll stop about halfway. And I'll try to push it, and now I'm pretty much, so I keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, and I'm done. So that's an example of, so as the time I load there was 1 minute and 32 seconds. And you go straight to the next exercise, but I won't bore you with that. So what I showed you there was the chest press. And the one we're about to see was the seated row. So one here works your chest and arms. This one here, your biceps and your back muscles. And then you go to the shoulder press, which works more your shoulders and arms, and finally finish off with your leg press. That, in my opinion, is enough if you do that once a week to help maintain your fat-free mass, especially muscle mass. That's basically all the structural exercise I've been doing the last 5 years. Yep.
Yeah, just a quick question. So they say that when you first start working out, you'll see some serious results quickly because your body's adapting, like you said.
Yep.
But it gets to a certain point where your body will get used to those exercises, and you may not see that progression as quick. Is there a way around that? Like, do you have to sort of shock your muscls so then they adapt in a different way to then build again? Is there
honestly, I've used pretty much the same workout for the past 5 years. There's a few tweaks you can do. But it's a lot of it is because you're coming up against probably your genetic maximum potential.
Yes.
That's why you hear somebody who's never walked into the gym, they have that beginner's gains. You'll have this increasing curve where your strength and even your muscle mass might just go like this. But then you're starting to butt up against what's actually genetically possible for your body. So I suspect a lot of time that's what's happening. Because adapting to the stress is just... See, the body's not going to do any more than it needs to. See, putting on muscle tissue is obviously, we can see, it comes off with age because it's what you call metabolically expensive. Okay, and we sort of grew up, or we evolved in a time where there probably wasn't a lot of food about like there is today. So it had to use whatever it could get very efficiently, and to maintain muscle mass is very expensive. So it's going to drop muscle mass if there's no need for it. That's why it declines so quickly. So but to get back to your question, what I really suspect is happening there, you really, I know you hear it all the time, but then if you sort of look back and see how far you've come, you say, oh no, I'm not making those gains anymore. Well, you're getting very close probably to your genetic potential. You know, we can't just make gains forever. And then you can obviously, you know, you're more experienced, then you can start forcing yourself with, then you push your body harder because it's not going to want to put on more muscle tissue because it's so expensive. Okay? But I'm sort of look at it this way, look, if I can maintain what I have and you have a good strength level where you're happy with whatever you can get through your day, you know, unless you're in a competition or you're in a bodybuilding contest, why would you sort of worry about it? But we can have a talk after. So the experience of that really, what I was going through there is that you're feeling great for about the first 60 seconds. Then the next 15, you start to feel this moderate burn in your muscles. About 90 seconds, which is where we've said finish, you feel like you got severe burning. And if you do it right, somewhere between 90 seconds and 2 minutes, you feel like your muscles completely on fire. That's what it feels like. But remember, we're sort of doing this to actually activate the fight or flight response. Trying to send a message. So what that means is that in the first 60 seconds, you know, you're feeling energized, you're fine. Then you start feeling under pressure, as if you just spotted that line. But obviously there's no line, there's just you in the leg press with your legs on fire. Then somewhere between a minute and a half and 2 minutes, that's where you'd be terrified because the line's just about got you. But you're not terrified, you're just 100% fatigued. And it's only at this point that you might just activate the fight or flight response. Does that make sense? So we're trying to get this acute stress in a safe way, but we're trying to tap into how the body actually works. But then again, instead of using a lion to activate this, we just use the leg press. And the fight or flight response is actually just that, acute physical stress. Okay, so that video I showed you is up on YouTube. There's the other 3 exercises. You can just go into my website and there's a link to it. So it's the Big 4 workout. Okay, so any questions with strength training there at all?
I was just going to ask about the comparison between the VO2 max and fuel usage.
Yep.
And weight training.
Okay. I haven't actually got... This is where we sort of get back to that whole... So now I talked about, you can see... let's put it this way. So we're talking about that. See, today we're so focused on this... What can we burn in... So to lose weight, we go and exercise, we burn off this body fat. Right? So it's all about the time we're exercising. That's how we sort of got this, that's how we lose weight. But it doesn't work like that, see. We actually burn more body fat when we're sleeping. So exercise, in my opinion, has a different role than this burning of body fat in that time. Okay? And so that's what I tried to show, that you're not actually, even when you, people that can get what you call really fat adapted, and there's runners now doing it, and they can burn a lot of fat. Yes, they are burning more calories while they're running, and it is in the form of fat, but it's still minuscule to what you burn. Let's say just your basal metabolic rate. Let's say on average is about 1,500 calories we each need to just stay alive, just stay in bed. Okay, if you can just burn that in the form of your body fat, you're going to lose weight. Okay, so you might go and burn another 500 by exercising, but you're still going to burn your 1,500. So weight's just going to come regardless, as long as you can access it.
And a low carb diet can fuel the
It can, yeah, and that's what actually was what I was doing. But I sort of stayed away from all that tonight, because that's another sort of can of worms to open up. But yes, so now you're going into another realm where is it beneficial to be on it? That's why I was on it. Yeah, your body function is totally different when you're running as fat as your main fuel source. But sort of what I was trying to get across here is that look, exercise doesn't have the role of burning off that body fat in real time as we think, but it does have a role, and it's a different kind of exercise than running. It's a very short. That workout here, it takes me about less than 10 minutes once a week. That's it, and that's why I say look, 30 minutes once a week. That's when people come and see me. We do a few other things, but you're really only working hard for a few minutes. It's just about that stimulation. Now it takes a little bit of skill and practice to get there, because it'll be the hardest 10 minutes of your week. I promise you that. But it is only once a week, so we can't have it both ways. But I think what you asked about the fuel burning. So you will burn sugar. But actually, when I punch in, resistance training, 10 minutes into my calorie counter, it's about 67 calories. So we just got to get this out of our heads that if we're trying to burn off body fat and the more activity we do, it just doesn't work like that. Okay, it'll only be a few more hundred anyway. So, does that answer your question, or I probably went off on a bit of a tangent there?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Any other questions while we're here? Okay, so putting it all together, I believe that because I've retained this resistance exercise, that was part of, was able to maintain and my fat-free mass. And it also helped me actually to get leaner. Okay, so it's all about that stimulation. But sort of what happened here? See how I actually went up after I stopped running in my fat-free mass, and then it dropped down quite dramatically. What do you think I did? Any ideas? Well, I reduced my calories. Now, the reason that I did that is not because I tried to, but when you eat a lot of fat as your main energy source, you stay full for longer. And I was experimenting a lot with fasting, only having one meal a day, and it's quite easy to do because you don't get hungry. You can take it off your own body and you don't have the same hunger sensation. So to give you an idea of what I was eating, this would be a meal. See a lot of veggies, obviously the freeze-dried liver powder as we have here tonight. But you can see there's a lot of fat in there. So from the avocado, bok choy sauteed in butter, eggs cooked in beef drippings, and so it's basically vegetables and fat with some protein. Another meal, see there's olive oil, and everything is cooked in olive oil. There's even garnish there with coconut oil, pumpkin coated in olive oil in the green salad, and on, butter with beans. So it was running on a lot of fat, and quite a large meal, but a lot of it was vegetables. And those reduced calories because I said there's actually not that many calories in that meal. But because it's the form of fat, when I sort of wanted to experiment with this fasting, it was quite easy just to have that one meal a day and not get hungry. Because it's just releasing, your body's just releasing that fat back in. You might store some of it, but then you release it straight back. And you can see it also did wonders for it also gave me fat loss. But what I didn't like was it gave me this loss of lean mass. So then you've got to ask, well, then what happened here? What do you think happened? If I reduced my calories to lose weight, I increased my calories. So then I gained back my fat-free mass. But that increase in calories actually also gave me the fat loss, or slight fat loss, not much, but I didn't gain any fat. So whatever I started eating more of gave me the gain I wanted and the loss I wanted. Which is sort of, this is the ideal scenario. You gain lean mass and you lose fat mass. So what type of calories do you think I increased? Any guesses? Protein. Well, fat and protein, but in particular protein. So this is a graph of, I haven't shown you, but I log all my data. I've pretty much done it for the last 2 years. I photograph everything I eat and weigh it, and sort of just the lifestyle now. But basically, in a nutshell, this is a graph over the amount of protein. You can see the grams there in the vertical. So basically, from 1st of November 17, I started increasing my protein. And ever since then, it's been about an intake of just over 200 grams a day on average. So what does 200 grams of protein a day look like? Okay, well, I have my first meal at about 10 a.m. I said I ride horses till about 9. And it looks like this. Looks nice, do you reckon? So it's basically, I put bone broth and fat in a pan, and meat, and that'll be my typical brunch. So that'll be about 100 grams of protein. Okay. So what's the powder stuff on top? Well, you can see we've got a bit of a display here tonight. So that there is liver and kelp, and if you don't like eating like that, that's why we also make it in capsules. But what is it that liver and kelp is? Well, we start with just a nutrition profile of a different few items. So you see we got apple and carrots. Compare those to red meat. You can see that red meat is pretty much higher than when you're just looking at things like your iron, copper, vitamin A, B12. It's a lot higher in meat than it is in apple and carrots. So red meat probably wins over vegetables in a nutritional sense. But when it comes to liver, you can see it just outdoes them all. You know, it is just very high nutrient density. Okay? And that's why I eat the liver powder and why we started making this product. Even something like vitamin C. You know, we think of vitamin C not being in animal products, but there's actually more liver than there is in an apple when it's done correctly. Okay, when the liver is processed correctly. So it's more or less like, think of it as a multivitamin, you know, to get more nutrients or to make sure I get them. So the wild harvested kelp that's in the capsules, what's that all about? Well, this is actually the kelp being harvested in Tasmania. So it's basically whatever washes up on the shore, they then collect, and this is it's supposed to be the cleanest air in the world, I think, measured by NASA in that area. But what kelp is particularly high in is iodine. Okay, and it's pretty much got everything, but it's particularly got iodine, which there's a lot of iodine deficiency, which we need for the function of our organs. If you go onto our website, you can see there, it's basically because liver doesn't have a lot of iodine. You put kelp in, you'll get a lot more. And these are the guys behind what we call Grassland Nutrition that make the product. But talk to the other three guys because the guy on the left here is just a ring in. Okay, so back to my second meal, which I have at about 5. A typical dinner would be steak and eggs. Could look like that. Steak and eggs and fat, or just the steak and fat. Pretty simple. So that's what 200 grams of protein looks like. Okay. I just have the 2 meals a day, never hungry in between. So it makes cooking very simple. However, when I go and eat out, this is what a typical brunch would be. So you notice there's no bread or anything on there. So it's pretty much, if you eat this way, it's pretty much one of the lowest carbohydrate diets you can have. Typical dinner is not really that much different from eating at home, which would be, this is what I do. So I usually ask for 2 eggs instead of having the sides. I say, can you just give me 2 eggs instead of the chips and the salad or the veggies? Usually they don't charge me extra. But sometimes I do have a bit of veggies, even though I don't eat them. You can also just go Korean barbecue, which I went to a few weeks ago, which is, it's really good for just mainly having meat. But I actually prefer just steak and eggs, funnily enough. People say, don't you get sick of it? Not really. That's all I crave. So, okay, so basically let's have a bit more detailed look at what happens to body composition when you do that for 19 months, which is how long I've been at it. Well, this is the gist of it. Gain lean mass and lost more fat mass. Exercise didn't change, job didn't change. I'm pretty monotone in what I do. I get up, rise, horse swim 4 to 9, come home, I eat my 1 meal, go to sleep, wake up, do some work on the computer, eat again, go to bed. Once a week, I do strength training. That's it. So I'm a fairly good sort of subject for testing that sort of thing. But if you put that through a DEXA scan, January, about 2 months after I started at higher meat, and then I just had one last week. This is basically what it showed and how it looked. So pretty much the same weight, 400 grams difference, but I'd gained that 1.2 kilo lean mass, and I'd lost close to a kilo body fat. Okay, so a low carbohydrate diet is definitely the key. Making sure you eat enough protein. Okay, and I've chosen not to eat vegetables. I haven't got into that why, but I don't know if it's necessary. It's just sort of what I've stumbled into. But definitely a low carbohydrate diet and then making sure you get enough protein. Any questions at all? Okay, so let's do a quick summary. So we talked about bending the body fat curve, which is pushing it downwards. So we stay lean. And we worked out that if we try to use exercise to burn fat at 100% effort, we just burn more sugar. But staying in bed will actually burn us the most fat. So that's the burning taken care of. How to access it? Well, stay insulin sensitive. And how do we stay that? What's the main key to doing that? Low carbs, yep. And then, again, you'll just burn that, no problem. And then what we don't want to do is become insulin resistant, and that's pretty much what a high carbohydrate will accelerate. And there's another way to become insulin resistant, which is over-exercising. But do it right, you'll bend this body fat curve downwards, and then our fat-free mass curve even though it's normal to lose fat-free mass as we age. But what is it that normal is? What we call sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass, and we actually all agree that normal is not so good in that sense. But to be a bit abnormal looks a bit better, and just by these short examples, it does look like that it is possible to even maintain that as we age. So be a bit abnormal, and to be a bit you've probably got to be a bit abnormal to inflict this acute physical stress. Again, since there's not much free roaming lines, you can just use resistance training. And again, according to this guy, 30 minutes once a week is enough. Make sure you increase your protein. That will keep your muscles, your fat-free mass, and it won't put on any fat. And it can basically look like that. So, that was it about diet and exercise. Very last 10-second quiz. Is diet about what you eat or how much you eat? It's what you eat. And again, making sure you get enough protein. Exercise. Is it about how much you exercise or is it about how you exercise? It's about how you exercise. Thanks very much for having me for this nice venue. And that's it.